Hope you're having a great time at Web Summit. Mike Butcher with TechCrunch, and here I am with Ryan Smith from Qualtrics. Ryan, do you know what's really interesting? By the way, you having a good time?
I'm having a great
Dublin?
time. Every time I come to Dublin, like, I get invigorated the second I hop off the plane. It's awesome here.
You, what's fascinating really about your story is, you know, you came from Utah. Now, not a lot of tech companies come from Utah, to be brutally honest. Love Utah, I'm sure it's wonderful. Unfortunately, I've never been there myself. But you basically built it out of a basement in Utah. And you very much came from the sort of, actually, you know, you built it for the academic world, actually, didn't you, initially? Do you feel like that's something that a lot of technology companies miss today, is building something that really solves a very, very sort of niche issue, especially inside areas where it's almost like a Trojan horse. You built something for students which they loved, and then they grew up and took it into the enterprise.
Well, I think people, if I were to look at young tech companies now, I think that the main thing that they miss a little bit is how long it takes to actually let that play out. Our first, I look at Qualtrics as a series of a bunch of startups. Everyone's like, hey, that was a great idea when you started, but we had a startup to target the academic market, and that's all we did for 7 years. And then, you know, we thought, hey, wait a minute, if we could get this in the hands of students and they liked it, then maybe there was a chance they would take it with them into the enterprise. I don't think anyone could have predicted that that was gonna work, especially in 2002 when you're sitting in a basement in Provo, Utah, you know, calling academic after academic after academic that have no money and are extremely demanding. It's not your typical MBA exercise where you're like, this is the market, this is the North Star on where we're going. It was more of, these were the only people that would listen to what we were doing and would be early adopters on our technology. And then you have to pivot as you go. So where you start is not where you end up in tech. And you'll see these one-off stories where someone takes their first shot at it in tech, and it's a huge market, but those aren't the normal, those are the outliers.
You didn't really, I mean, in a way, this discussion has been built around culture, but as far as I can tell, you didn't really know what you were doing, right?
Yeah, I do.
You kind of made it up as you went along.
Absolutely. You're literally building the car as you go, and you've got a mechanic in the trunk, right? And so I think that, you know, we're talking about culture a little bit, but, you know, you have to have experiences to develop your culture. You know, culture is built from scar tissue. 2 people in a basement or 3 people in a basement, there's no culture. Right? And I think everyone wants to say,
culture, there's only 3 of you.
There's 3 of you. Everyone wants to, and you haven't been through anything yet. So I think the scar tissue of experience, of bootstrapping, of sitting in the basement, that's where a culture comes from. And as you grow and scale your business, you have to be able to rely and fall back on those times of creativity and innovation. And if you don't have that, you're gonna have a real rough road ahead because you haven't gotten comfortable using the gears that exist only in those days.
You make a quite a sort of a thing, as it were, when you talk about your company, about this issue about radical transparency. And very interestingly, there was quite a controversial story in the last sort of 6 months to a year about a company who decided that everyone was going to have a base salary of $70,000 a year. So roughly, what, sort of £50,000 a year or something like that. And it was a very sort of, almost as a Marxist approach to creating a company. Have you ever considered that sort of approach?
No. Not at all, and the reason why is because we're extremely transparent, but we're transparent for a different reason. We're transparent because I think most companies will fail because of focus. We all have great engineers.
Why did you make that decision to be transparent, as you'd call it? Why did you make that decision?
Because if focus is going to take us down, how do we make it so if we're hiring people to come in and think, how do we give them the information they need to do their job? So we're 500 employees last year. We're 1,000 employees this year. So you're going to put 500 employees on top of each other, and the time to ramp and the time to do their job and what's going on inside our building is probably our biggest risk at Qualtrics for success. And it's actually probably most people's biggest risk.
So what you're saying is that in order to scale quickly, you have to give people information.
Yeah, we're basically hiring people and giving them a computer and saying, we're hiring you to think. It's not 1985 anymore where we're saying, okay, just put this part together and you're in a production. No, the only thing that, like Peter Drucker, when he studied organizations, like had to compare to what we're dealing with now is academia, where people were given an office and they were told to think. So if we can't control what people do, and we can't control how they think, the only thing we can control is the environment around them. And if you're hiring someone to think and you're not going to give them the information they need, then what's the point?
Do you think Silicon Valley's lost its way?
Do I think Silicon Valley's lost its way? Yeah, I mean, look, there's only one Silicon Valley in the world, and everyone tries to duplicate it. I mean, what goes on there, it's just magical. Like, I had no idea what it was. I was in Utah, and everyone's like, hey, go to Sand Hill Road. I was like, what's that? The first time out there, I was out in fundraising in 2012. And I think it's absolutely magical. Is there a lot of noise? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like being in Utah. I like that I don't have dinner appointments, and I go to work and then I go home, and there's not a lot of noise. And I think that's a competitive advantage. I like that we're there and we're able to put our heads down and focus on building a great business. But if you look at the magic and the innovation and everything that's coming out of Silicon Valley, it's unrivaled. But those people aren't from Silicon Valley, right? Those are people who have moved there from everywhere in the world. So it's the people from Dublin, it's the people from Australia, it's the people from Hong Kong, and they're all there in that hub. But I also believe that no one has the exclusive on smart people.
You've raised now, a very large amount of money, in the region of $220 million. Accel, Sequoia.
And
so you're no slouch. You've actually, you've done Sand Hill Road, right?
I've done the Sand Hill Road.
And apparently now you actually have a pub in the office in Dublin.
We do. We have a Guinness pub in the office here, right on Grafton Street. Everyone's welcome.
Sounds good to me. Do you consider that a moment of excess? Coming from a basement in Utah, and now you've got a pub in the office in Dublin?
Well, in Utah, we can't really relate to the pub. Like, I mean, we're a couple cultures away where, but if you look at what it, no, I don't think it's excess. I think it's part of the culture here, and we love it. Like, everyone wanted to have a pub in the office, and early on, coming from a basement, I think the one thing that people don't realize is everyone wants to hold on to that culture. That culture sucked. Right? No one knew who we were. We didn't have any money. Everything I wanted to do and was thinking about in my head, I could never execute on. And then companies get bigger and they're like, oh, we got to maintain that culture. I don't want to maintain that culture. I've waited 14 years to develop the culture that we can have the pub, that we can give free healthcare to employees, that we can put actually our managers through training and actually help develop them. That culture is way better than the culture in 2007. And the goal with culture is that it's like product innovation and iteration. It's got to get better and better every year, and that's how we think about culture. It's going to change.
You're classified now as a unicorn, over $1 billion in valuation.
Whether I like it or not, right?
Do you like being a unicorn? How's that horn working out for you?
Yeah, I cover it with a hat.
You were cash flow positive when you raised this amount of money.
And we still are.
Let's get a prediction from you. How many unicorns? There are 142 official unicorns now. How many do you think will be alive in a year's time out of that 142?
How many unicorns will be alive? I think most of them will be alive, right? I think the question is how long's the runway, right? I think that obviously if people have gotten to that scale, then they're doing something right. I mean, venture capitalists and fundraising, although it's pretty frothy right now, I mean, these people aren't stupid. I think the question comes, I lived through 2007, 2008, 2009. Our business actually skyrocketed. And I think
during the economic crash.
During the economic crash. And I think entrepreneurs, especially that are in that club, have what it takes to do something great, obviously. The question is how much runway do they have? If you look at people who have done something great for over a long period of time, typically they can just mess up more than everyone else, right? And I think that's the concern, is when 2007, 2008, 2009 happened, my competitors, I mean, imagine this, I'm sitting in a basement in 2006, my competitors have raised $40 million venture capital, it's 3 of us. They were selling a better product for cheaper than us, and we flew right by them in 2011 because they were dealing with investors and they were dealing with all these ratchets while we were just developing and doing what was right for the business and able to play the long game. So I think anytime you can't play the long game, that's when you should be worried.
The whole unicorn thing, and it's all yada, 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 unicorn. But I mean, do you think that the media is part of the problem? I'm a journalist, by the way.
Would you be asking me that if you didn't think that?
Okay, fair enough.
No, I think it's actually, I think the media's done a great job with it, right? I think that the only thing I feel bad for is some of these young companies that think they need to be in the unicorn club to be relevant. We were 50 million in sales, kicking off 30 million in cash in 2012. Pretty good, right? No one congratulated us. The second we raised 70 million in capital.
You didn't get a headline on TechCrunch because you were making cash.
No, it did. So the second we raised capital, everyone came out, now you've arrived. And I was like, look, I built 2 businesses. I built a business that was totally bootstrapped, and our only ability to have liquidity.
Do you feel resentful?
No, because we switched models. I built both sides. That business is a lot harder to build than they're both high growth, but I hope entrepreneurs say that, look, I've not been in the Unicorn Club and now been in it. I think there's no difference. It's not, once you get there, it's not gonna be like, oh, my life changes. So just because you're not in that club, like, you still can have an amazing, absolutely profound business and impact on the world. Don't let someone else determine your success. And I think that's important for a lot of the startups here, is to say, whether you're in that club or not. I have a friend who's got a $700 million business that he owns 80% of that's cash flow positive, and he's like, I just need to get on the map. And I'm like, look, if you don't do anything, you're gonna be a billionaire. And like, well, you've changed your industry. You're already on the map.
Stand still, then
just
you'll do well.
Stand still and go, right? Don't let someone else determine what success is for you.
When's the bubble going to burst then, do you think?
I don't know. I think we're definitely, I don't think it's going to burst, but I think it's definitely not going to be high fives and chest bumps like it is right now. I mean, people are just throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. And so I think that it's definitely going to come down, and this is where that runway conversation is. How much runway do you have?
I was looking at where you've scaled to. You have offices now in Dublin, Seattle, Sydney, Dallas, Texas. Often I look at this, like, this isn't like sort of New York, Paris, London. What was your strategy for how you scaled internationally? Yeah,
so I came to Web Summit 4 years ago, checking out Europe, and I fell in love with Dublin. And so I hired our first employee and did a big announcement. We're gonna do 150 jobs in Dublin, and I was 20% sure that I was gonna be able to do that. And we're over 150 jobs today, less than 2 years, and we beat it. And we just announced another 100 jobs. My guess will be 300 or 400 people here in Dublin. We just opened up London. Then we went to Sydney. I think that what we're trying to do is, I mean, a lot of it's around people. When we have great leaders, they do what they've done here in Dublin. We hired a great management team in Dublin. They've done a great job. Every time I come over, there's more and more people. We're hiring great talent. Dallas is just an extension of that. And I think not being from like the main hub, we relate with Dublin. We relate with Dallas, Sydney. I I mean, I would say that we've done everything the wrong way in building stuff, and it's been beautiful. It's worked out great.
So you're cash flow positive, you've raised $220 million, you're, rocking and rolling, as it were. When's the IPO?
When is the IPO? That's a great question. So look, I think that's in the plans for Qualtrics. We're going to go public. I mean, that's the plan. I think the idea is we have a long runway. So going public isn't hard to do. I'm much more excited about being public and what that looks like. I mean,
are you worried? I mean, very much what you've done now is almost scaled in a sort of kind of naturalistic way. But when you are a public company, you're going to have a whole bunch of other issues. The issues of how you report to public markets and how you behave as a company.
Yeah,
Do you feel you'll feel more restricted as a result?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's different strokes, right? And so there's a lot of freedom we have right now. But one of the things that we're doing is when we raise money and we got our board involved, we've asked them as partners to simulate as much as we can being a public company, to the point where the way we report, the way that we're preparing our company, we're building it out. Our European expansion's very much in its infancy. And so I'd like that to bake a little longer. We're trying a couple different go-to-market models. And so I think that's what we're looking at. It's much more about being public. I've been doing this for 13, 14 years. I mean, it's pretty crazy that as a junior in college, sitting in your basement, you could be working on a 30 or 40-year tech company. And I mean, no one could have predicted that. And so we're definitely playing the long game, but we could be public right now. We're bigger than a lot of the enterprise public SaaS companies already.
If somebody could give us a time machine and you could transport yourself back and you could walk into that basement in Utah and talk to yourself 13 years ago and say, hey man, it worked out, what would you say to yourself 13 years ago?
So it's funny because I actually thought about this. I was in New York and I was going to a customer event last year. And in 2004, I went to my first trade show and I had to borrow a booth. I didn't have enough money from the airport, so I sat on the subway with this booth that was borrowed and went through the subway and came out at this station and totally I thought if I went to a trade show, the world was going to come out and buy Qualtrics. And it was funny because I was heading to a customer event last year in New York, walking right by that same subway station up to the hotel, and I walk into a room with 400 customers just in New York City alone. And I was like, I would just tell that kid to don't give up, man. Just keep going. It's going to be a grind, and everything you've got in your head that it's supposed to look like is not going to be what it looks like, but, just keep going. And I think that, perseverance is a barrier to entry. And there's a lot of people that don't want to wait that out. And fortunately enough, we made some decisions early on that gave us optionality to keep going and grind and fail and fail and fail again. And I think that's part of our DNA and part of our culture that every company needs, because you're going to need to rely on that when you're scaling into these new markets. You're going to need to know, hey, I was in that subway, I can do this. Yeah. And you need to fall back on that.
Perseverance is a barrier to entry. There's words to conjure with. Ryan, thank you very much for coming
awesome,
and talking to us. Thank you.